The shuttle's warning alarms blared, harsh and insistent, as Elias Voss gripped the control yoke, knuckles white with strain. The world outside became a canvas of chaos. Siritha's crimson sky, seething as if alive, painted with flashes of shifting light and turbulence that clawed at the ship's hull. The craft shuddered, every metal rib screeching in protest as the main engine spluttered and died. "Not like this," Elias whispered, teeth clenched. Panic tightened its grip as he forced the emergency thrusters into action, the vessel's frame shivering with each strained push. Through the cracked viewport, the planet below revealed itself, a writhing, phosphorescent sea of towering foliage that pulsed in vibrant blues, greens, and glimmers of gold, like the heartbeat of an alien world. The crash was inevitable, but the sight was arresting. The shuttle shuddered as it fell, and the ground rushed upward. The impact split metal, the world tilting and spinning as Elias was thrown from his seat. Consciousness was fleeting, but when it returned, he found himself hanging, bruised and battered, suspended in the wreckage as if caught in some cruel joke. Dazed and bleeding from a gash above his eye, Elias freed himself from his harness, pushing up through twisted aluminum and the sweet, sickly-scented air. The forest around him was alive, radiating a soft, surreal glow, as though stars had burst and taken root, painting the world with their light. A gentle wind whispered through the luminous canopy, carrying the echoes of unseen creatures and the pulse of the world itself. With the last vestiges of daylight snuffed out, Elias stumbled forward, seeking shelter and sanity in a world that had not been mapped for survival. At the edge of his makeshift camp, where the wrecked shuttle offered little more than a windbreak, Elias saw the shimmer again. A flicker, strange and deliberate, snaking along the perimeter of his clearing. His fingers brushed against his sidearm before he froze, eyes locked onto the silhouette standing just beyond the reach of his flickering firelight. A woman stood, or at least something akin to a woman. She was no human. Her form had an ethereal quality, as if woven from stardust and moonlight. Her hair fell like liquid silver, moving as though caught in an unseen current, and her skin radiated the deep blues and golds of the forest, casting dancing patterns that mimicked the canopy's glow. But it was her eyes that drew him in, intense, luminous, and wise, like twin suns casting their gaze on him. Elias took a breath, hand hovering near the pistol, but not drawing it. Didn't realize the locals threw welcome parties. The creature tilted her head, eyes flicking over him with predatory grace, studying the man who had dared trespass. When she spoke, her voice was music and thunder, deep and hypnotic. "Most do not come uninvited." "Fair enough," Elias replied, but the tightness in his chest was no longer fear. It was curiosity, the hunger of an explorer who had stumbled upon something extraordinary. Her smile was barely perceptible, a crack of moonlight. "You must be the infamous Elias Voss, the one who hunts artifacts, defiles sacred places." His pulse quickened. "Guilty as charged, but you'll find I'm not here to pillage. Just survive." The woman stepped closer, moving like the wind itself. "Survival has a price," she murmured. "And so does curiosity." Elias met her gaze, the air between them charged electric. "I'm used to paying." "Good," she said, and for a moment, there was silence, the forest pulsing like a giant heart. "You're wounded. You shouldn't be alive." A challenge in her tone, and yet her eyes softened. "Our ways, they heal. They bond." Elias' heart thrummed at her words. He didn't know if it was the promise of survival or the magnetic pull of her presence, but he felt it deep, resonant, like something primal awakened within him. "Explain," he said, though he knew it was more a demand than a question. She tilted her head, the glow of her skin rippling like waves across an ocean. "In my world, we share a connection through what we call the veil's embrace. It intertwines us, sharing not just life force but memory, essence, soul." "Sounds intense," Elias admitted, swallowing hard as he took in the shifting pattern of lights on her skin, each moment more beautiful and hypnotic than the last. "It changes those who join, transforms them." Her eyes, now a brighter gold, drew him deeper. It's sacred. It's binding. He knew the risks, the whispers of rituals binding like chains. But in the storm of survival, the allure of her presence was a siren's call. "So what's the cost?" he asked, eyes locked on hers. "Everything," she whispered, fingers tracing a delicate line along his jaw, leaving trails of blue light in their wake. The air cracked and hummed as if the forest itself held its breath. Elias reached out, his touch breaking the electric silence as he caught her wrist, feeling the warmth and the pulse beneath. "I'm not afraid of that." Her smile deepened, the forest shifting as if answering her unspoken words. "Good." She pressed her lips to his, a kiss that sent jolts of raw power through his veins, sparking sensations that went beyond physical. The world expanded, the forest lights vibrating around them like a symphony, every pulse of energy singing in harmony with their heartbeat. They became not just two beings, but a part of something ancient and infinite. The ritual had begun, and when dawn's violet hues seeped through the canopy, Elias woke to find his body marked, streaked with radiant patterns that glimmered like the heartbeat of Sirith itself. The echoes of that night, the union, the bond, lay beneath his skin, impossible to ignore. Aria, eyes still glowing, sat beside him, the world's glow softening around her like a protective veil. Her voice was gentle, but carried an unbreakable weight. "Now you understand, Elias. You're no longer just an outsider." He looked at her, the forest's pulse within him, and realized she was right. In this strange, radiant world, a part of him was now bound forever. Elias awoke to the muted chorus of the forest, a symphony of deep, resonant hums and soft crackles. The dawn light filtered through the canopy in tendrils of amethyst and gold, casting elongated shadows that moved like spirits across the forest floor. He sat up slowly, the weight of the ritual pressing against him as if the world itself had claimed a piece of his essence. The patterns on his skin were still there, glowing faintly like ancient runes. They pulsed in sync with his heartbeat, a living reminder of the night he could never forget. Every breath felt heavy, as though the forest was breathing with him. He reached out, fingers tracing the designs etched across his chest, feeling the pulse beneath his skin as if it was a second heartbeat, alive and foreign. "Morning," Aria's voice called, soft and melodic, from somewhere beyond the makeshift shelter. Her silhouette moved against the glowing backdrop of the trees, her silver hair catching the early light and scattering it like 1,000 tiny stars. Elias forced a smile, though it felt tight. He stood, the world spinning for a brief moment, as the energy in his veins seemed to crackle with newfound power. He could feel the forest now, every living thing a thread in the web of life that reached out to him. "I never thought I'd wake up like this," he admitted. Aria glanced over her shoulder, those golden eyes catching the light, their depths unreadable. "You aren't the first," she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "But you may be the first to want it." He nodded, the memory of her touch still tingling on his skin. "The veil's embrace, it changed me." "Changed us?" "Changed you," she corrected. "We are still connected, but you, Elias, are now a part of this world. This forest, its pulse is yours, and yours is now woven into it." A chill ran down his spine as the implications settled in. He was no longer just a traveler seeking fortune. He was bound to Sirith, to Aria. And the forest knew it. It hummed louder, more insistent, as if celebrating its new child. Aria stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking to a breath. "You have questions," she said, almost as if reading his mind. Elias glanced at her, his curiosity flaring. "Too many to count," he admitted. "Why did you show me? Why trust me with this?" Aria tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Because you're different. You see, Elias, the others who came before were not seekers like you. They were conquerors. They took, destroyed, never asking if they should." The memory of his past flashed before his eyes. The countless planets he'd scavenged, the lives he'd disrupted in the pursuit of profit. A bitter taste lingered in his mouth. But here, in this forest wrapped in a perpetual twilight, he felt something he hadn't in years, a sense of belonging. "And now?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Now you learn," she said. "The forest has chosen you, but there is still much to understand. There is power in this world, and there are dangers you are not yet aware of. But with the veil's gift, you can learn how to wield it." He raised an eyebrow. "Wield it? You mean I have abilities now? Beyond whatever this is?" He gestured at the luminescent patterns on his skin. "Yes, the veil shares memories and life force, but it also shares wisdom. Skills long forgotten by those who have no bond with this world. But first you must learn to trust me. Trust the forest." Her eyes deepened, becoming pools of gold, and for a moment he thought he saw a flicker of vulnerability in their depths. Elias took a step forward, the forest responding with a soft rustle. "I think I'm beginning to." The air shifted, carrying an electric charge. The forest seemed to pause, as if listening. A bird-like creature with wings like gossamer hovered nearby, its eyes a mirror of Aria's. Elias sensed it wasn't just watching, it was gauging him. "Good," she whispered, her voice only for him, "because what comes next will test that trust." Before he could ask, the ground beneath them shuddered. The forest's glow pulsed brighter, and a deep, resonant vibration thrummed through the air. Aria's expression darkened, the patterns on her skin flickering with urgency. "It begins," she said, reaching for his hand. The contact sent a jolt up his arm, waking every nerve. He could feel the power surging beneath them, gathering strength like an unseen tide. The forest was no longer just alive. It was aware, and it had a message. "Trust me," Aria said. Her golden eyes met his, fierce and unyielding. And before Elias could answer, the canopy above split open, revealing a dark sky alive with shifting stars and a moon that shone red as blood. From the rupture came a sound, deep and guttural, unlike anything he had ever heard, an ancient call that promised both peril and wonder. He squeezed her hand, the pulse of the forest matching his heartbeat, and for the first time since the crash, Elias understood. He was not merely a visitor. He was a part of the story, and it had only just begun. Elias stood frozen, hand in Aria's, as the sky above split open, a jagged tear in the fabric of Siritha's night. The forest, once so gentle and alive, now quivered with anticipation, the luminescent foliage pulsing in sync with the deep, resonant growl that echoed through the clearing. The air felt thick, as if charged with a force that was both beautiful and terrifying. Aria's eyes locked onto his, golden and resolute. "The echo has come," she said, her voice a blend of fear and fierce determination. The forest answered her, a low hum that seemed to shake the ground itself. "What is it?" Elias whispered, more to himself than to her. He could feel the thrum of his own heartbeat, the pulse of the veil's gift shifting beneath his skin like a sleeping dragon awakening. "It's a warning," Aria said. "A rift between worlds. It's happened before, but never like this. Not since the Great Binding." Elias's brows knit together as he tried to piece together the meaning behind her words. "The Great Binding? It's an ancient event," she explained, glancing at the scarlet moon overhead. Its hue painted the sky in dark, blood-soaked streaks. When the forest was forced to protect itself, to become what it is now, it locked away a power, an ancient, sentient force that seeks to reclaim what was lost. A sudden burst of wind howled through the clearing, the trees bending with it, as if bowing to some unseen ruler. The forest's light flickered, its brilliant blues and golds dimming to a soft, uneasy glow. The echo, a deep thrumming that resonated through Elias's chest, shifted in tone, as if acknowledging their presence. The sound was almost like a voice, ancient and deep, echoing with a consciousness older than the stars. "You have to help me," Aria said, her voice sharp and urgent. "We must meet it before it fully awakens. The forest will guide us, but only if we are strong enough." Elias took a deep breath, glancing down at the glowing runes that covered his body. Their pulse seemed to quicken, as if anticipating the challenge. The touch of the veil still tingled on his skin, a reminder of the ritual, of the bond he now shared with Aria and the forest. He felt the warmth of her hand in his, a tether to the world around him. "Where do we go?" he asked, voice steady despite the storm inside him. "Follow me," she said. Her silver hair caught the light, rippling like the surface of an ocean, and she turned, moving with the fluidity of water, leading him deeper into the heart of the forest. The trees parted before them, their leaves shifting to make way, a path of luminescence appearing in their wake. Elias followed, the air heavy with the scent of wildflowers and something else, a sharp, metallic tang that made his pulse quicken. The forest spoke to him, its voices like whispers brushing against the edges of his consciousness. He reached out, feeling its power course through him, urging him forward. The path led them to an ancient stone circle, half buried in the underbrush and draped with luminous vines that seemed to breathe. At the center, a pool of water mirrored the sky, now darkened and streaked with red. The air grew colder, and the vibrations intensified, making his bones hum. "Here," Aria said, releasing his hand and stepping forward. Her eyes were fixed on the pool, where the reflection began to shift. A shape emerged, outlined in red and gold, the image of something half-human, half-spectral. A guardian spirit, Elias realized, his chest tightening with awe and dread. The forest shifted around them, the luminescence growing brighter as if trying to dispel the encroaching darkness. The shape in the water stirred, eyes opening with an ancient, sentient light that made Elias's skin crawl. A voice echoed in his mind, deep and rich as the forest itself. "Why have you come, child of the veil?" Aria stepped closer, her voice strong yet trembling. "To stop the echo from breaking free. We cannot allow it to reclaim what was lost." The guardian spirit's eyes locked onto Aria, and then to Elias. The red glow intensified, and Elias could feel the power radiating from it, pushing against his chest as though it were a physical force. "You have touched the veil, and it has touched you. Are you prepared for the cost of your choices?" Elias met the spirit's gaze, the patterns on his skin shifting and swirling in response. He swallowed hard, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. "I'm ready," he said, not knowing if he was telling the truth. But he couldn't turn back now. The forest, the ritual, Aria, all of it was now a part of him, an undeniable force that surged within. The guardian's form rippled in the water, then solidified, taking on the shape of a woman draped in robes of living vines, eyes like two blazing suns. The forest fell silent, the echoes of its hum replaced by a profound stillness. "Then come, show me that you are worthy of the power you seek." Aria stepped forward, her hand reaching out, and the guardian's form shimmered, spreading the pool's glow into a halo that cast the forest in brilliant, otherworldly light. Elias took her hand, the energy between them pulsing, and they were drawn together as one, their voices rising in the language of the forest, a song of old, of trust and transformation. The guardian's form enveloped them, the echoes of the veil awakening, calling them into the ancient dance. The air crackled and surged, the forest light now like a storm, wild and untamed. Elias felt the power coursing through him, every memory, every thought, every shred of life force woven into the eternal song of Sirith. It was not just the bond that was being tested now, but their very essence, their willingness to become more than what they were, to be transformed, and to confront what lurked beyond the echo. "Are you ready?" The voice, ancient and knowing, reverberated in his mind. Elias closed his eyes, feeling the forest's power merging with his own. He didn't know if he was ready, but he knew that no matter what came next, he had made his choice. "Yes," he whispered, and the forest answered with the roar of its timeless heart. The ritual of awakening had begun. Elias's vision blurred, the world spinning around him as if he were caught in the center of a cosmic storm. The guardian's voice resonated through his body, a deep, rich echo that seemed to come from the heart of the forest itself. Let the veil show you what lies beyond the shadow. The forest shimmered, blinding him with a light so bright that he felt as though his very soul was being seared. The runes on his skin flared to life, each one a thread of pure energy weaving into a tapestry that spread across his body, glowing with a brilliance that rivaled the stars. He felt the pulse of the forest synchronize with his own, like a second heartbeat, ancient and alive. Aria's touch remained firm in his grasp, grounding him as the force surged through them both. She met his eyes, her golden gaze a steady beacon in the tempest. It was as if the forest had opened its soul to them, revealing its secrets, its fears, and its boundless, aching strength. The guardian's voice returned, resonant and timeless. The power of the veil is neither gift nor curse. It is a choice, a bond. Those who awaken it must accept its cost. Do you understand? Elias's throat was dry, but the answer tumbled from him, raw and unfiltered. I do. The world around him shifted, as if he were falling into a deep, endless current. The light fractured, splintering into shards of silver and gold that drifted like fallen stars. Images bombarded his mind, visions of Siritha's past, moments before the great binding, before the forest became sentient, before the echo. He saw the ancient city, its towering spires made of glistening stone, and the people who had once thrived there, their faces alight with ambition and greed. The echoes of their voices whispered warnings that had been ignored. He saw the first signs of the echo, a deep, seething shadow that slithered at the edges of reality, biding its time. It whispered promises of power, of liberation, but at the cost of life itself. Then, the moment when it was unleashed, when the forest had fought back, when the ancient beings had joined as one, becoming the veil. A sudden jolt pulled him back to the present. The guardian, now standing in the center of the stone circle, raised her arms, and the luminous vines coiling around the circle's edge thrashed as if alive, their green light pulsing in sync with the energy that flooded Elias's veins. You are bound to us now, child of the veil. And this world, your world, must be defended. The forest's light surged, washing over them, entwining them in a living, breathing net of power. The ground trembled, and Elias fell to his knees, the sheer force nearly pulling him apart. Aria's hand clenched his, and he could feel the warmth of her touch through the chaos, the steady, unyielding strength she gave him. Her voice cut through the storm, fierce and fierce, like a blade. Elias, listen to me. The echo is moving. It will awaken soon, and if we are not prepared, we won't survive it. He opened his eyes, the world around him now bathed in a deep, swirling light. The forest seemed to lean in close, every leaf and branch alive with purpose. The guardian's face, now framed by the dance of light, was no longer the image of an ancient, passive protector. It was a warning, a harbinger of what would come if the echo was not stopped. The glow in the guardian's eyes faded, replaced with a grave sadness. You have seen it now. You have seen what awaits. Only those who carry the essence of the forest can banish the shadow. But to do so, you must become more than what you are. The echoing words reverberated inside him, shaking loose memories he had long buried. The greed that had driven him, the lives he had taken, the shame that had followed. The forest's power surged, cutting through those memories, burning away the guilt and doubt. He felt the forest teaching him, shifting his perception, showing him the beauty that could be found in surrendering to a greater purpose. Elias, Aria whispered, her voice breaking through the fog of his thoughts. The forest will give you what you need, but only if you're willing to accept it. We're bound, and this power is as much yours as it is mine. We are one now, a part of the same fate. He looked at her, her hair aglow and eyes sharp with resolve, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The forest held its breath, waiting. A shiver of recognition coursed through him, an understanding that their destinies were now intertwined, that neither could stand apart from the other. He felt his pulse quicken, a rush of power that came not just from within him, but from the bond they shared. I'm ready, Elias said, his voice strong. The patterns on his skin shimmered and expanded, spreading over his arms and chest until they traced every inch of him, a living map of power. Aria nodded, stepping closer. Together, they reached out, hands pressed against each other, the forest's energy flowing between them. The ground beneath them pulsed as the guardian's voice echoed once more, now tinged with a note of hope. Then be ready, for the echo awakens, and this world will either rise or fall by your hand. The wind rose to a deafening roar, and the ground quaked with such force that Elias feared he might be thrown into the sky. The trees bent and twisted, roots unraveling, and the light around them coalesced into a singular, blinding beam that reached toward the heavens. And then silence. The storm passed, the light dimmed, and the forest settled into an uneasy quiet. The red moon hung in the sky, its glow now a muted, somber hue, and a shadow shifted in the distance, dark and alive, whispering promises of chaos and power. Elias and Aria stood together, their fingers still linked, breathless and wide-eyed. The forest had chosen them, and now it would test them, body and soul. The true battle had begun. "Are you ready?" she asked, voice low but unwavering. He met her gaze, the echoes of the veil thrumming in his chest, the bond between them humming like a heartbeat. "Always." A roar split the silence as the shadows shifted, and the echo's voice surged like the tide. The battle for Sirith had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. Dawn was a thin line of fire in the sky, shivering like a ribbon pulled by an unseen hand. The forest, once serene and alive with luminous whispers, now seemed to hold its breath. Elias stood beside Aria, their hands still linked, their connection pulsing with an urgency that nearly made his heart burst. He could feel the energy thrumming through his veins, more potent than anything he'd ever known. "Are you ready?" Aria's voice cut through the early morning silence, strong but tinged with a vulnerability that made Elias's chest tighten. He nodded, though the words felt inadequate. They were more than ready. They were the only chance this world had. The forest had awakened to them as its champions, but the shadow that loomed beyond the canopy was an old, twisted force that had taken centuries to return to this realm. The ground beneath them quaked, shattering the fragile quiet. Elias's muscles coiled, ready to move, to fight. He glanced at Aria, whose eyes blazed with the intensity of a sunstorm. Her silver hair shimmered, as if stirred by an unseen current, and the intricate, luminescent patterns etched into her skin glowed brighter. A deep growl erupted from the woods, like the rumble of a predator long starved. Then came the first sign of the echo, an inky, swirling mass of shadow that slithered between the trunks of the trees, devouring the light and sending the forest into a sudden, unnatural darkness. "They're coming," Elias whispered. His voice carried a tremble he couldn't suppress. "Let them come," Aria said, eyes never leaving the shifting mass. "We're the storm that will stop them." Suddenly, 100 voices seemed to rise up in the forest, some high and shrill, others deep and guttural. The ancient power of the veil stirred within Elias, pushing him forward. With a force that seemed to echo in the very air around him, he raised his hand, feeling the runes across his skin brighten to a fierce blue. A flurry of movement sprang from the trees, creatures born of nightmares and whispers, made of shadow and malice. Their eyes glowed an unnatural crimson, and their bodies flickered like smoke. Aria's hand tightened on his, and in that moment, he knew they were both ready to face whatever the echo would send. The first of the creatures lunged, a half-formed, jagged mass of limbs and teeth. Aria's voice rang out like a clarion call, sharp and commanding. "Let the forest guide you." The ground beneath Elias surged, tendrils of root and vine erupting from the earth, twisting around the creature. It screeched, a noise that rattled the bones of the living, as the roots tightened like a vice. Elias didn't hesitate. He focused the energy flowing within him, summoning it into a spear of light that erupted from his palm, striking the creature dead. It dissolved into a wisp of darkness, the forest's glow returning as the threat was vanquished. "Keep moving," Aria shouted, turning her head to meet his eyes with a look of fierce determination. More creatures burst forth, a relentless tide, black as tar and filled with jagged, sharp edges. Elias and Aria fought as one. Each strike, each burst of energy synced with the forest's pulse. His limbs moved faster than he thought possible, guided by an intuition he'd never known he possessed. The ritual had changed him, unlocked power and knowledge that felt ancient and instinctive. They were more than two people now. They were the embodiment of the forest's will. Aria swept her arm in an arc, sending a wave of glowing energy cascading through the creatures. They splintered like glass, shattering into fine shards of smoke and light. Elias took in the scene, sweat streaming down his face, his breathing ragged, but his eyes alight with the thrill of victory. But then the air shifted, and the forest seemed to dim. A presence, dark and vast, pressed upon him, making his skin crawl. From the heart of the woods, the true herald of the echo emerged, a creature larger than anything he had seen, with a form that twisted between solid and spectral, a darkness that seemed to devour reality itself. Its eyes were twin suns of crimson, and when it spoke, its voice echoed through the trees like the tearing of ancient roots. "You think you can challenge me, children of light?" Elias's muscles locked. This was different. This was what he had seen in his visions. The creature that had brought ruin to Sirith, now standing before him, poised to claim the world once more. Aria squeezed his hand. Her voice was a whisper, but resolute. "Remember who you are. Remember what we are." Elias's heart swelled with the power of the veil, of the forest, and of their bond. He opened his mouth, letting the energy gather within him, and spoke with a voice that seemed to carry the weight of the ages. "We are the end of your night." The creature let out a sound that could only be described as a laugh, a deep rumble that shook the earth and splintered the trees. But it was a laugh laced with uncertainty. The forest's glow intensified, a wave of luminescence surging from the ground up, enveloping them in its protective embrace. Elias's eyes caught the gleam of the runes on his skin, now more complex and luminous than ever, pulsating in time with his heartbeat and the forest's pulse. He stepped forward, the energy in him coalescing into a spear of radiant light, sharper and more brilliant than anything he'd ever seen. With a roar that resonated through every cell in his body, he lunged at the creature, eyes locked on the twin suns of crimson. The forest held its breath as the battle between light and shadow reached its first decisive clash. The outcome was far from certain, but one thing was clear. The echo's return had awakened a power within Elias and Aria that neither of them had expected. And with it, the first true strike of defiance had been made. The force of the impact sent a shockwave rippling through the forest, shattering the glowing canopy and igniting a burst of spectral light that left Elias momentarily blinded. He stumbled backward, hands instinctively raised to shield his eyes. The creature, its twisted, churning form a canvas of darkness and seething energy, roared in fury. Its crimson eyes, now seared with pain, locked onto him with a stare that promised death. "Elias!" Aria's voice cut through the haze, fierce and commanding. He felt her presence behind him, a steady, grounding force that pushed back the terror coiling in his chest. He blinked, the blinding light dimming to a warm glow as the forest responded to their defiance. Tendrils of luminous vines twining around shattered trees and broken ground. The air hummed, a deep resonance that seemed to pulse in time with the forest's heartbeat. The creature lashed out, sending a wave of dark energy hurtling toward them. Elias dove sideways, the tendrils of shadow scorching his arm as he rolled and came up on one knee, the runes on his skin blazing with a cobalt light. "Aria!" he shouted, searching for her amidst the swirling darkness. She stood defiant, her silver hair shimmering with raw power, her eyes locked on the creature as she whispered something in a language Elias couldn't understand. The words seemed to carry an ancient gravity, the forest bending in response, its luminescence pulsing like a beacon. The creature's form shuddered, a momentary fracture in its dark veil as the power of the forest surrounded it. Elias could feel the change in the air, a sudden shift that whispered of something more ancient, something greater than either of them had anticipated. "Can you hold it back?" Elias asked, rising and sprinting to Aria's side. Aria's golden eyes met his, and for a fleeting moment, a shadow of doubt crossed her features. But it was quickly replaced with an expression of resolve. "Not just hold it back," she said, the words echoing with a promise. "We're sending it back." The creature shuddered again, a sound like 1,000 chains breaking. It reared up, its immense form towering above them, the forest trembling beneath its shadow. Elias reached for Aria's hand, their fingers finding each other in the tumult. The runes on their skin pulsed in harmony, radiating energy that spread like wildfire through the forest. Aria drew in a deep breath, her chest rising as the forest power gathered into a blazing sphere of light. Elias felt the energy merge with his own, tendrils of pure force threading into his veins, filling every fiber of his being. For the first time, he knew what it meant to be part of something greater than himself. The creature's eyes widened as the light grew, the darkness that made up its body shuddering and splintering under the onslaught. It screamed, a sound that resonated with primal rage and ancient grief. The forest's glow became blinding, and for a moment, the world around Elias and Aria ceased to exist, consumed by the radiance of their combined will. "Now!" Aria's voice thundered, breaking through the cacophony of light and sound. Elias drove the energy outward, a spear of pure, blinding force that struck the creature square in its heart. It roared one last time, a sound that seemed to shake the very heavens, before collapsing into a swirl of black ash that scattered on the wind. Silence fell in the wake of their victory, heavy and profound. The forest held its breath, the luminous vines pausing in mid-twist, their glow dimming to a soft, steady pulse. The storm that had threatened the world was gone, and in its place, there was the quiet of a victory that could only come at a cost. Elias stumbled forward, the energy coursing through him, fading to a gentle hum. He reached out, his hand brushing Aria's cheek, feeling the heat radiating from her skin. "We did it," he whispered, disbelief mixing with relief. Aria nodded, but there was a shadow in her eyes. "This isn't over." The echo was just the beginning. "What do you mean?" Elias asked, confusion knitting his brows. Before Aria could answer, the ground beneath them quaked again. This time, it wasn't the forest that shivered, but the very air. A sharp, cold wind blew through the clearing, carrying with it a scent that made Elias's stomach clench with dread. It was the scent of metal and fire, sharp and bitter. Elias looked up to see a sky streaked with crimson, a shadow moving in the distance. Ships, ancient, mechanical beasts that resembled nothing of what humanity had ever created, emerged from the edge of the horizon. Their engines whined like a chorus of tortured souls, and on their hulls, the markings of the Dominion were unmistakable. "They're here," Aria said, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and defiance. The Dominion had come to reclaim what they believed was theirs. And as Elias stared at the ships approaching, glinting like dark stars in the blood-red sky, he knew the real fight was only just beginning. The forest glow deepened, a fierce blue that spoke of both defiance and protection, wrapping around Elias and Aria as they stood side by side, ready for whatever would come next. The echo had returned, but so had the strength of the land and the bond that had been forged between them. The dawn of the unseen was here, and with it, the battle to reclaim the future had only just begun. The rumble of approaching engines grew deafening, mingling with the wind that now swept through the forest in an unnatural, chill current. Elias's heart thudded in his chest as he felt the forest itself tense, its radiant glow pulsing like a heartbeat, synchronized with his own. Above them, the crimson sky split open with the metallic screech of the Dominion ships descending from the heavens, their hulls carved from the same dark material that Elias had seen in the ruins of forgotten worlds. "Aria, we need to prepare," Elias said, voice tight but determined. The brief taste of victory had been fleeting, stolen by the shadow of the Dominion's arrival. Aria's eyes met his, gold flaring with both defiance and understanding. She lifted her hand and let the threads of light crawl across her skin, as if to reassure herself of their bond. "We have until they land. We need to gather the others," she said. Her voice was steady, but Elias noticed the slight tremor in her hand as it reached for his. "The hidden ones," Elias said, catching on, "they'll know what to do. But we'll need to move fast." The forest responded to their urgency, roots pushing through the soft soil to create paths and protect them as they sprinted deeper into its heart. The silence that followed them was strange. It felt less like the forest holding its breath and more like it preparing. He could feel the thrum of its pulse, the heartbeat of the world guiding them. Aria stopped at the edge of an ancient grove, a place where towering trees twisted into intricate shapes, their bark covered in runes that seemed to shift with the light. A soft, ethereal hum filled the air, and as Elias stepped forward, he felt the brush of something intangible pass over him, a presence older than time. "Welcome, chosen," a voice resonated, deep and resonant, from the dark of the grove. From the shadows stepped a figure cloaked in robes that shimmered with the same luminescence that now adorned Elias's skin. The figure's eyes were a mirror of the forest, amber and liquid, and they were locked onto Elias and Aria with an intensity that set his blood aflame with recognition. "Kira," Aria said, her voice low with both reverence and relief. Kira inclined her head, a slow, deliberate motion that spoke of the weight of centuries. "The Dominion has come for the last of us, and you have summoned the Veil. You are ready, but your enemies are more formidable than you know." Elias met Kira's gaze, knowing that the weight of their fight rested on their shoulders. "Then we stand together, as we always have. What must we do?" Kira's gaze softened, his eyes sweeping over the young warriors before him. "The Dominion sees this world as a conquest. They believe it will give them dominion over the stars. But what they do not know is that this world is the cradle of an ancient power. If they take it, they will only destroy themselves." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. The air grew thick, the silence laden with the echo of an impending storm. The sky above churned with the arrival of the Dominion ships, dark and glistening like broken stars. "Then let us make sure they know that we are not theirs to claim," Aria said. Kira's eyes met Elias's once more. "The ritual you completed binds you to this land, to us. It has gifted you the power of the Hidden Ones, the Guardians. You will need it now more than ever. The Dominion's leaders carry with them a key, an artifact that has power unlike anything they've ever encountered. It is the only way to close the rift they will seek to open. We must take it from them before they can use it." Elias's pulse quickened. The pieces fell into place like the final moves in a game that had been played for eons. He nodded, feeling the hum of the forest's energy surge through him as Kira extended a hand. "Take this," Kira said, placing a small, glowing stone in Elias's palm. It was warm, almost alive, and its light pulsed like a heartbeat. "This is the Sentinel Stone. It will guide you, but only if you trust in the bond you share with this world, with Aria, and with the Hidden Ones." Elias's fingers tightened around the stone, its power flowing into him like a current, connecting him with the essence of the land itself. He felt Aria's fingers entwine with his, her touch steadying him, grounding him in the midst of the gathering storm. "Let's move," Elias said. The forest reared to life as they ran, trees and roots forming a path that led them deeper, into the heart of the grove where the air was thick with the scent of old magic and the whispers of a past long buried. Their destination was clear, the Temple of Echoes, a place where the first Guardians had once defended the world from invaders, where the final stand would be made. The sound of the Dominion's ships grew louder, their metallic drones echoing across the forest like the laugh of some mechanical god. Shadows slithered beneath their hulls, dark tendrils of something far more insidious. The hidden ones emerged from their cloaked sanctuaries, faces cast in the strange glow of their luminescent markings, eyes burning with the resolve of those who had spent lifetimes waiting for this moment. Aria raised her chin and spoke, her voice carrying through the clearing like a war cry. The Dominion may come for us, but they will find we are not alone. We are the forest, we are its protectors, and we will not yield. The forest pulsed around them, a sound like a roar building from deep within the earth, joining with the echoes of their battle cries. The first line of defense was set, the stakes higher than ever before. The Dominion would arrive in moments, and when they did, they would find the forest of Okum Reo ready, its guardians ready to face the unknown, to protect their world at all costs.